Hey, what's up, guys? So, I was thinking a bit yesterday, and I kind of want to get some feedback. Well, I don't kind of want to get some feedback. I want to get some feedback from you guys. I had an idea about about this self-identification pronoun, this transgender discussion, and you know, um, assuming that if we start from a place of what's important most is that the view of yourself does not change, that people are accepting of your preferred pronouns, and that basically just society as a whole allows for, you know, um, understanding and, you know, in order to do that, we have to have a mature discussion about it, and the start of that mature discussion, um, you know, um, obviously, you don't want to force people. You see um, with some of the legislation that's been passed or tried to pass in Canada, or Title IX, things like that, which it really has more to do with just equal treatment amongst men and women in sports groups. But so I want you guys to talk to me, comment on this, and let me know. And I mean no offense by any of this. I'm just trying to work out a way that everyone could be happy, or everyone could be free to live the way they want to live. And so what I was kind of thinking is, um, what would you guys think about? So there's pretty much no debate as far as the scientific community goes, as far as gender goes. There's two genders, and those two genders um, are basically cataloged in their ability to procreate and have children, which is kind of irrelevant, to because there are those of us who are straight and don't want to have kids, and and I'm just using the terms of I'm using the parlance of our time. So what I was wondering is, if we maybe came up with a term like subgender, and I know there will be those of you who think that the distinction um, would be like to say subgender would be to quantify it as something not as valuable as primary gender. And in a lot of sciences, there's like the term subspecies. Subspecies does not mean a different species. It means um, differences in the same species, um, but in a different place, a different potential morality, different, just not lower than, just different. You know, there are different subspecies of birds. There are different subspecies of every species, basically. So if we get rid of the thought that calling something a subgender would be a derogatory term, and really that would be more dependent on the person hearing it, because once you explain to people, that's the term subgender, um, you know, um, there's nothing in it that would indicate that it's a lesser form of anything. So, say we coin this term subgender, and by all intents and purposes, if you choose to identify, say you were born a male and you choose to identify as a female, your subgender would then be female. And all according, for all things that 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 the person would feel the subgender is um, valid for, or I guess what I'm saying is for everything that subgender can cover, subgender would cover, you know. And the only time that there would need to be a further distinction as far as primary gender would be in cases where, like, say, like Joe Rogan was talking about, where there is a biological male identifying as a female participating in the women's MMA. Okay, now whether or not you're a feminist, whether or not you're just for equality, I think we can all agree that to take a man or a biological man, regardless of how he identifies or she identifies, placing them in physical competition with biological females, that's not equality. That's not even fair. You know, I'm sure it could be fair to a certain degree, but ultimately, look, and like I said, I'm not saying any of this to be, I'm not saying this to, um, to hurt anybody or to distress anybody, but you know, if I were to get into a physical altercation with any of my ex-girlfriends, and I dare say, 90% of women who would match me in weight and in overall size, there's a very high probability that I would physically best them if the parameters were the same. Like, I'm not a trained fighter. Now, if they weren't a trained fighter, can you kind of see where I'm going with this? Like, if you plucked me off the street and with someone who matched my qualifications for a MMA fight, which is non-existent, matched my weight, matched my age, even matched my reach, chances are, statistically, I would come out on top. And so, therefore, that is not a fair contest. Now, equality is about equality, but it's not about, nobody should get a better chance at something than somebody else. That's not equality. That's the opposite of equality. And for a biological male who identifies as female to want to compete against female MMA fighters, regardless of whether or not he's trained or not, there is an aspect to that, and that aspect is what I'm talking about with the further distinction of primary gender. Now, for all intents and purposes, primary gender would never really come about, and it's only in the cases where somebody who is knowledgeable, who is even-handed, would have to make a decision about that exact instance. A biological male who's identifying as female wanting to compete in female combat sports, and there are going to be some people that say that she should be able to do that. There are some people that think that she shouldn't, but that's a case where we would have to leave the distinction up to somebody more professional in the area of the contest, and I think that that's a fair assessment, considering you wouldn't take your car to a hairdresser, regardless of what side of the fence a hairdresser falls on as far as gender issues. No, you go to people who have expertise in things that you need people with expertise in. I think that sentence makes sense. Sorry, I'm just kind of winging it by this, but I've been thinking about it for a while. So, I know some people would say, well, I don't want to, I don't feel like it should be a subgender. Like, well, and seeing that's the thing. Like, what I'm aiming to do here is make things palatable for the people who aren't really thinking about, what's really going on. Like calling someone by their preferred pronoun doesn't hurt anybody, but there are people who are going to stand on morality and all that crap. And for those people, if you were to take the problem at the current state, which is, you know, a biological male wanting to be called a female, well, their their argument is, well, but there's a distinction between biological female and biological male. But if you were then to create another category, and we call it, like I said, a subgender, then for almost everything in life, there would be no necessity to call attention to the primary gender, unless you are a biological female who is identifying as a male, and you want to play, say, tackle football. You want to play on the professional level, college level. Then somebody who is knowledgeable in the area of physical fitness, the strain on the human body of any type to engage in this level of aggressive contact sport, would then have to make an educated decision. And keep in mind, these people would have to be they'd have to be even-handed. And I think you'll find that in the long run, you know, if your preferred pronoun is she or him, people are calling you she or him, and people are treating you as she or him until a matter that you know, um, the actual equality, and you would even argue that these people would not be judging whether or not you were capable of something. What they're doing is judging the actual equality of the situation, because for better or worse, a biological female identifying as a male wanting to play aggressive contact sports, it would be irresponsible, and it would be ignorant to say that that is an equal contest, um, unless physical strength is characterized, unless attributes by the biological female identifying as a male could in fact replicate the the data known to the people who are professionals in their fields. At which point, a judgment call would be made, based on the data, which really wouldn't come down to primary gender. It would be can this person run fast enough? What's the average speed? Data would be gathered, and then it would be assessed. Now, if that data were assessed and the choice was made that they don't believe that that's equal, and you're feeling that it was just because you wanted to do something, that's completely different. That is inflicting your freedom on somebody else. You're free to be free to yourself. But if including somebody in something, and then revisions have to be made to account for somebody else's freedom, then you're not using your freedom in the way it's meant. Your freedom should not affect something else, you know. And there will be people who want to play contact sports, and there will be people who, based on the call it an accountant for equality, who would assess that and arrive at a conclusion not based on your gender, not based on anything but your prowess as far as this goes. And and if you're tested and you can't run as fast as you know uh, let's call it 50% of the team you're trying out for, you can't lift the weight of 50%. If you can't match at least half of them, then the decision should be made that's not fair. It's not fair for you. You know, it's not fair to inflict your freedom on somebody else, but it's also not fair to you because it's putting you in a contest with people who have been evaluated as having stronger physical strength, are able to run faster, you know, and that's how it would be assessed. Has nothing to do with, you know, primary gender or this subgender that I'm that I'm discussing. Um, and when you're filling out a job application, you would complete your subgender, and you wouldn't have to, write it down as subgender because, like that's nobody's business, you know. And only when the actual and see the thing is, it's not the fact that a biological male identifying as female just wants to participate in female MMA. That's not what the problem is. The problem is people are assessing the initial data, and you know they don't want to allow somebody who has an advantage to engage in these contact sports, because an advantage would not make it equal, would it? That's kind of what advantage means. So so that's basically what I'm thinking, and so I'm curious as to what you guys think. The we would we would reflect to subgender, and even people who are not, um, you know, people like me who are I'm a biological male. I identify as a biological male, but I would put down my subgender, because my subgender I identify as male. You see what I mean? Like it doesn't have to, and then basically the term primary gender would become almost irrelevant, and except in the extreme cases when somebody who not not for any other reason but actual equality would be assessing that, and somebody like that would be hired and vetted by people who are even-handed. There would be obviously a committee that would assess the decisions made by this person, and just to ensure that there is actual equality and fairness, because equality and fairness are the same things. These people would assess that, have their work covered, have their work looked at, and in some cases they would people will you know people will initially, in the first stages of this, they would initially you know make mistakes, but the fact is, if we could agree as a society to a term like subgender, then the subgender isn't calling into question anybody's morality or anything like that. It's not calling into question biology. It is strictly something that well, I guess the primary biology that term would be primarily used for instances where it would be the actual equality would be measured. And if you're a proponent for equality, then there should be no problem with the equality being measured. And equality can be measured because, as I said, you know, a a biological male identifying as a female wanting to compete in MMA, that's mixed martial arts, physical, like like uh like beating on biological females, you know. And then if there are in fact, um you know, other biological males identifying as female, well then that too would be identified under, like by these equality accountants. And at that point they would have, you know uh, subgender would not even come into it. What would come into it is the same thing that comes into it normally, which is, you don't fight outside your weight class. There's there's a set of rules that that govern a sport that have nothing to do with gender. And that's what it would be coming down to. And even at that, you know, the term primary gender would have no bearing on anything in that decision that this equality accountant would make. In fact, just thinking about it now, like the only time primary gender would come about is when there was a medical situation and there's potential medical problems that are happening because of your primary gender, and the doctors need to address that because your life is in danger. And then once again, nobody's arguing the primary gender, it's the subgender category. And then we push for subgender to be the norm until circumstances are so extreme that the primary gender would need to be looked at just simply by medical professionals. And it wouldn't it, that and that's basically what it would come down to. And if you have if you have testicular cancer and you identify as a female, are you going to keep your testicular cancer in the name of your doctor not calling you a male? That seems ridiculous. So, and that's what I mean by we need to have an adult mature discussion about it, because this whole idea of subgender, it would be a compromise on the part of the transgender to um, acknowledge that even that everybody would be treated as their subgender, and that would be the norm. So at that point, that would become gender. You wouldn't even have to call it subgender anymore. But primary gender would be like the last card in a deck of cards that is like a joker. Like, it doesn't need to be played until you're making jokers wild, you know? So, um, a lot of this is about just wanting your way is not equality. Just getting your way is not equality. If you want equality, then I'm curious. I want to hear about this from you guys. Just and I want to hear some rational discussion. Like, I mean, what are the potential pitfalls that you guys see? I mean, where do you guys see a problem coming into it? And keep in mind, like, I'm not identifying a problem as, well, I don't want to have to identify as a subgender. Why can't I just be my primary gender, which I just explained? You're not a medical professional. Once again, that would be up to the professionals that we entrust, because we already entrust them. That primary gender would not come into things unless a case like I talked about, where you identify as a female but you have testicular cancer. Well, the doctor is going to need to talk to you on a frank, open basis. And he's thinking, I need to get the cancer out of this person. He's not thinking, well, okay, how do I phrase this so as to not impede on their self-image? That's ridiculous. Okay? Like, if your life is dependent on your self-image and you're willing to die so you can have what you want, that's not equality. That's being a brat. So I realize this this might make some people mad. I don't know why it would, but then again, I acknowledge that I haven't foreseen everything, which is exactly why I would like to get into an open discussion. And I'd like to get into a civil discussion about it. Like, if you take issue with my idea, fine, explain why you take issue with you. But if your issue is just that I want to be what I want to be because I want to be it, like, nobody's disputing that. I'm just talking about, like, the extreme circumstances where you're not being equal, and so somebody else has to step in to be equal for you. Because the one thing that you can't expect everybody to do is to be fair regarding themselves, which is why we have police. If people were capable of being fair to themselves and with others, there would be no need for police. And so you know, this would allow, and at that point, if you're the kind of person that you're not willing to call someone by their subgender, then you're just a fucking shithead, because if you're not in a position where you have to evaluate something like that, if you're not this equality accountant, then you're literally just doing it to be an asshole. Like, it's not going to hurt you to call someone by their preferred pronoun. So at that point, you know, like, you should be labeled an asshole. In fact, you should get asshole tattooed on your forehead. Because if, as I said in my earlier video, if all it takes is for you to identify somebody the way they choose to be identified, if you're not a doctor or you're not one of these equality accountants, then who fucking cares? They do. It doesn't change your life at all. So stop being a fucking piece of shit and realize that the world is bigger than you, and that if this person wants to be called a female, well, if you're just hiring for a job in sales, then you don't have any fucking reason to not call someone what they want. You do it every day when someone says, "Hey, my name is Bill, my name is Thomas." You agree to those every single day with every person you meet. You agree to call them by their name. Taking issue with this is like taking an issue with people who weren't named Tom. That's literally how stupid it is. Like, for you to stand against that. So, you could say, "Oh, well, I'm not going to do this because of this." Well, then you're an asshole. That's one thing I don't agree with Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson says, "I'm not using your words, and because I see where it leads." Okay, well, you see where it leads, but it hasn't led there. And there's nothing saying that it will lead there if people can't, if people can just adjust a little bit. It doesn't have to come to that. There are no absolutes, and to behave as though there's absolutes is it's premature and ultimately ignorant if it leads to people being disenfranchised. So yeah, so what do you guys think of that? I mean, um, I really like to hear what you guys have to say, and the thing is, I won't know if I'm on the right track, or if maybe I just shouldn't even be thinking about this stuff, like, unless I hear from you guys. So don't like, don't subscribe, just be good to each other, but like, talk to me. I'm a pretty rational guy. I mean, like, yeah, I come off a little brash, but I'm pretty rational, and I'm compassionate. I'm caring. I believe that people should be free to live the way they want to live, as long as they're not, child molesters or rapists or serial murderers. So yeah, I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say, and I will be polite, and I will be accommodating and compassionate with you guys, as long as you are compassionate and all that with me. But if you're gonna come at me with, like, "You're an ignorant piece of shit because of this," well, fuck you, and I'll rip you apart in the comments anyway. Chances are, like, fucking, if you're starting out that way, you probably have fucking, you don't even have a high school education if you're gonna start out, like, ripping into me when you don't even know me. So if we can all be nice to each other, let's all be nice to each other. Like, if you disagree and you don't feel like you know why you disagree, then don't comment, because I'm looking for feedback. I'm looking for people who are wanting to identify as female or male. You know, I want to know what they think. I want to know if they could. I want to know if they could compromise with this. And you know, the thing is, when you show you're willing to compromise, it automatically puts people in the other position where, if they're not willing to compromise, they already look bad. So, part of what's going to make it easier for all of us in this world is to all be willing to compromise and all be willing to roll with the punches. Some punches aren't going to be fair, and so we have to be analytical about it. We can't. There should be no blanket anything. Like, that's not how science works. Like, I mean, like I said, there's no absolutes, and there shouldn't be. You know, and if you're looking for equality, my suggestion would be offering equality in a way that is meaningful for you. And if your only objection to it at this point is, "Well, no, because I don't want to have to be feel like I'm different by choosing subgender," well, that's not what I'm talking about. Because what I'm talking about is the subgender becoming gender, and then primary gender becoming completely irrelevant, until it's completely necessary. And you know what I mean by completely necessary, like the testicular thing. So, you know, just keep in mind, I'm not trying to offend anybody or anything like that. I'm literally trying to figure out how, you know, everyone on this planet can meet in the middle so everyone can be happy. You know, that's what my aim is. So, if you're gonna respond and comment, just remember that that's my aim. So, keep the aggression to a minimum, because I mean, really, being aggressive on the comment section of YouTube is the same thing as, well, the only thing sadder than trying to be tough in the comment section is trying to have sex through the comment section, like with other commenters. I mean, that's terrible. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. And if there are aspects to this that I'm not covering, psychological aspects, I'm not a psychologist, so I open the floor to anybody who wants to have this conversation. Not just because I not that I think I'm right. I'm curious as to whether or not I could be. And I'm like, let's talk about this. All right. Well, I'm terrible at goodbyes, so I'm just gonna hit this stop button, and you know, we'll promise to see each other again later.